Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the co-owner and creator of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and in this video, I'm going to talk to you about an extremely important topic. And I'm going to go into how this applies to the different attachment styles specifically. And this topic is the topic of retraumatization. So retraumatization isn't like a thing. It's a word I've made up to sort of incorporate or encompass something that all happens to us at a subconscious level. And without the awareness of this, transition, transformation, healing becomes next to impossible. So these are like the root levels of something that's one of the most important things you might learn about your subconscious mental, emotional well-being throughout the course of your life. So please pay close attention. And this is one of those videos as well where I highly suggest like even taking notes if you feel inspired to do so, because some important things might come out of this for you. So I'm going to talk about like what retraumatization really represents, what it means, how it happens, some examples of basically how it can take place for different attachment styles specifically, and how to create change. So before I dive into this, we're still doing a sale to support our community right now. The coupon code is with you. It's all one word. I will put it somewhere in the video, so you can just click on the little, it'll be like a little tiny icon with an eye. You can click on it and it'll take you over to there. We are doing a tremendous amount of live webinars, group interaction, all sorts of things, especially going into July. And we now have over 30 courses, over 100 past webinars about all different topics. I literally choose the webinars monthly based on the feedback I get and like who votes for what webinars they want to see. So it's so much fun, and there's a lot of engagement in there. And we're really receiving, I'm sharing this because it's just, I want people to heal. I want people to have the ability to like do a deep dive into themselves and get the results they're looking for. And we get letters and emails, and it's like the most touching, beautiful thing. I'm so, so, so grateful to be doing this work with everybody in our community, but just emails every day like, this is changing my life. This has saved me. This has changed my relationship, all these different things. So I advise, if you're feeling like you want to create change, if you're feeling like you want to do a deep dive into yourself and your relationships and create healing, the Personal Development School is a really great place to be doing that. And we're here to make that really easy for you as well. So if you're struggling financially, if there's anything going on, just reach out to my team at info@personaldevelopmentschool.com, and we have different scholarship options available and all sorts of things we can do to help support everybody during a transition that the world is going through right now, where I think a lot of people need some support and some healing. And if we individually do that, collectively, things can start to shift. So let's talk about this really, really important topic, okay? Retraumatization. So what does it represent? Well, it represents the fact that the places that we all have wounds happen to us at a subconscious level, we keep re-wounding ourselves on autopilot all day long in a variety of different ways throughout the course of our lives. And I want to tell you the mechanics of how this actually takes place so you can really see it within yourself. Let's say, for example, that you grew up in a household where you are emotionally neglected, okay? So we'll take the typical dismissive avoidant, for example. What happens? Well, you don't get modeling in your subconscious programming for how to not neglect your emotions. You don't get modeled to you what it means to feel your emotions, express emotions, ask other people about emotions. And so there's a wound there. And in the words of Dr. Gabor Mate, trauma is one of two things: the things that happened that shouldn't have happened, like abuse, for example, or the things that didn't happen that should have happened, like emotional neglect, for example. And where we have a deeply unmet need, what we do around this unmet need is we create this automatic coping mechanism to try to just survive and get through and ignore the pain around it. And anywhere we have an automatic coping mechanism at the subconscious level, we stop emotionally growing and nourishing ourselves in that area because we're too busy having this knee-jerk reaction because it's been programmed into us to just cope and get through. So what we see specifically around our needs is the places that we have unmet needs, that one form of trauma where we have the things that didn't happen that should have happened. The places we have those unmet needs, we keep not meeting those needs in relationship to self. What do we see with dismissive avoidance a lot? They go on to neglect their own emotions because they had emotional neglect. And this is the only way that a trauma stays alive. Trauma cannot stay alive. Like the past is no longer here, it's gone. But the only reason we take the past into the present is because we keep firing and wiring the same neural pathways and the same neural networks that create the same habits and keep those traumas alive at a subconscious level in the neuroplasticity of our brain over and over again. And this is why the past hurts us now, because we've actually actively carried it with us without us recognizing this, because it's happening at the subconscious level and on autopilot. So let's look at some examples for the things that happened that should have, the things that didn't happen that should have happened, which really I'm just going to call our unmet needs. The greatest unmet needs we all have, irrespective of what our attachment style is, we keep not meeting in relationship to ourselves on autopilot. What do we see with fearful avoidance? They usually had their boundaries crossed or violated. They didn't get to have that sense of self, that strong self-identity and strong boundaries. And what do we see with fearful avoidance? They keep violating their own boundaries on autopilot. They keep not knowing, it wasn't modeled to them. And they've coped with that trauma by fawning, by people pleasing, by responding automatically, like sort of from a fawn response, right? And to like FAWN, right? And so what we see is they keep not meeting those unmet needs. And that's how that trauma and that pain stays alive. And what do we see with the anxious preoccupied attachment style? Often they felt rejected by a caregiver, right? This emotional distance that happened with the inconsistency, right? And they keep rejecting themselves on autopilot, rejecting relationship to self. So we keep traumas alive, and that's the only reason they still hurt us. That's the only reason the past still shows up for us and creates triggering and creates pain, because it's still alive within us, somewhat dormantly, but not completely, at a subconscious level. And until we recognize this, it's almost impossible to create change around it, because we need to become conscious of things first, have awareness around them, isolate a problem in order to then take the steps to reprogram or create change. So what can we do with this? The first thing I want you to do, and this is where I was like, get your pen and paper ready. Write down 2 columns. In one column, write down your greatest unmet needs from childhood, okay? And take some time to think about this. And in our needs course in the school, we have literally a list of all needs. We have your basic human needs, we have your moment-to-moment or tertiary needs, and we have your personality needs, which largely make up your sense of self and identity. If you're not in the school and you're watching this, think of the different things coming from your 6 basic human needs. So these are developed by Tony Robbins. So we've got growth, we've got contribution, we've got significance, love and connection, certainty, and novelty. Okay. And just look like from that, or whatever extends off of that. For example, certainty, maybe something that extends off of that is like security, safety, consistency, right? Or novelty, maybe freedom, exploration, adventure. Maybe these were unmet. So get really clear, okay, from those needs, what were greatly unmet in your life. And then ask yourself, like, take inventory around that. How am I not meeting these things in the relationship to myself now? How am I keeping these things alive? And if you take it a step further, you can look at, how do I reject other people from meeting this? Because you'll see that you do that too. Why? Because the subconscious mind builds a comfort zone around our pain. It goes, well, we survived, so whatever we did to cope and get through works. And so your subconscious mind is literally actively trying to keep these patterns alive, because it goes, familiarity equals safety and safety equals survival. So even though it's painful emotionally, we don't care. We're surviving. That's our focus. And so we keep these really painful things alive at a subconscious level, and we keep recreating them, and it's active to a certain degree. So this is one part. These are the things that didn't happen that should have happened. The other form of retraumatization is in the meaning we give to things when they happen. So for example, let's say, so we have pain, which is unmet needs, okay? And then we have suffering, which is the story we tell around the unmet needs, the meaning we give to the needs not being met. So let's pretend, for example, that you're a child and you don't get your needs met consistently for love and connection, okay? And so maybe you make that mean, well, I'm unlovable. I'm not good enough. I don't matter. I'm not important, right? And then we have our core wounds that come up from that. And here's the other thing the mind does. Wherever that happens, the subconscious mind is like, oh my gosh, this was not good. this felt like it could potentially threaten survival. So now I need to become hyper alert to the potential of this happening again. So the subconscious mind and the reticular activating system in the brain start filtering out information according to these imprints from trauma, these painful things that happened, and the meaning you gave to it. And then your brain goes on like hyper alert, looking out for these things. So until you've gone in, isolated these core wounds at a subconscious level, made them conscious, and started to reprogram them, here's what the brain does instead. It goes, well, I'm not good enough, I'm unlovable. And then it's constantly reprojecting that story out onto your external environment. It like sees, for example, let's say you go into a room full of people and you're like, oh, this person's going to think I'm not good enough. That person's going to think I'm not good enough. Or maybe you're in a romantic relationship and you're like, wow, I really am falling in love with this person, but I'm not lovable. So they're just going to reject me and hurt me. And then I get afraid. And you are retelling the story over and over and over again on autopilot throughout the course of your day, without realizing it. And this is coming from a set of subconscious thoughts, because these belief imprints create thought patterns, which create emotions and neurochemical responses. And your brain is often recycling these things because it's looking to see if these things might happen so it can protect you from it, right? Oh, if I might not be good enough, I better remember that so that I don't take that opportunity and embarrass myself, or so that I don't, speak up and get put on the spot and make a mistake, so that I don't, enter into a relationship and then just get hurt because I'm unlovable. And so your brain is constantly retelling these old stories of your traumas in different forms, but based out of that same core belief pattern over and over again on autopilot. And so these are the things, this is our response to the things that did happen that shouldn't have happened. So for example, maybe you got screamed at a lot in childhood. Maybe you saw violence in your home, and maybe you made that mean I'm unsafe. And what do we do if we have a core belief that we're unsafe? We are constantly reprojecting that out onto everything. We're like, oh my God, that thing could be unsafe. That thing could be unsafe. And while it's good to be cautious, it's not good to see through a filter of our wounds, because in this state of reprojecting, we set off all of these alarms and cortisol reactions and norepinephrine responses, and we get into sympathetic nervous system all the time, and we get dysregulated, and we're not doing anything empowering for ourselves. We're just re-traumatizing ourselves again on autopilot in our internal dialogue throughout the course of the day, or in the lack of meeting our needs that were unmet from childhood. So what I want you to do on this side, in this column, is to write down, what are some of my imprints? Like, what are some of the core beliefs? And if you guys are like listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, I want to do this work. If you jump into the school, the emotional mastery and belief reprogramming course is like about this. And it teaches you, there's a core wounds sheet and a need sheet, and it teaches you how to dive in and how to do the deep reprogramming work around this. But what I want you to do is I want you to write out, what were some of the painful things that happened to me in childhood? And what did I make that mean? And this doesn't just have to be childhood. The brain does this from our adult romantic relationships to our adult experiences. There's a greater impact before the age of 8, because our brain is sort of in a state of hypnosis until the age of 8, where we're producing mostly alpha and theta brainwaves, which are like the brainwaves you need to be hypnotized, and you're super suggestible. So imprints run more deeply usually at that early age. But these things can happen at any point in life, right? And here's another thing. These things don't get lighter over time. They get heavier, because the subconscious is programmed largely through repetition and emotion. So if you are just constantly reprojecting these stories and retelling them and oh, I could be unsafe here, I could be unsafe here, I'm unlovable here, oh my gosh, the person's not going to love me back here. And if you're constantly retelling these stories, you're firing and wiring these neural patterns and pathways further into your subconscious more deeply over time. And so it's like hardening these things in more. It's not reducing these things over time. It's like getting harder to reprogram and break these things down. So it's extremely, extremely important work to do. And so we have to understand this like filter we see the world through, or a reality filter, which is this filter of all of these programs and needs and unmet needs and belief imprints. And once we can start to understand this, we can reprogram what doesn't serve. And this is how we get into a space of healing, of wholeness, of greater self-esteem, greater self-worth, patience in relationships, not personalizing things, being able to hear people more effectively because we're not triggered by everything that comes out of somebody else's mouth when we're having a tough conversation. We have more intimacy in our relationships, more vulnerability, we feel safer, we love more, we trust better. Like all these things happen when we wipe out this stuff that's happening at a subconscious level beneath the surface. So what I want you to do is write in that second column all of the things you can think of that stood out to you from childhood or past relationships, and then right next to it, ask yourself, what did I make that mean? And you have to work on changing that story when you hear it coming up throughout the course of the day. And you won't recognize how much you've been telling the story over and over again on autopilot until you've actually made it conscious in the first place. And then you'll start catching it. And there's other ways. There's so many things you can do with this, but I won't go into like making this the longest video in the world. But, certain emotions are attached to it. We recycle the same emotions in relationship to those beliefs on autopilot. And those emotions are literally your feedback mechanisms. They're there to help you realize that you're re-traumatizing and that something's out of alignment. So when we can do that, we want to have a cognitive reframe around these painful stories. And we want to do that as repetitively as possible. And there's ways to reprogram from the belief level underneath. It's faster and so many different things, but maybe I'll make like separate videos about that. And then your needs, whatever your unmet needs are, you have to break that pattern by starting to meet those needs in relationship to yourself on a daily basis. So you're firing and wiring new neural pathways, new ways of relating, new ways of showing up in relationship to self. And that stops that trauma from just showing up over and over again because you keep carrying it unconsciously by accident from the past into the present. So this is really, really powerful work to do. It's probably the most important mental emotional work you'll do, period, because these are literally the roots of emotional pain and emotional suffering. We don't have pain or suffering for any other reason. So I hope you do a deep dive. You take the time to do this work. I highly, highly recommend doing it. And you see freedom on the other side. You see peace on the other side. And this is a lot of work I did on myself as a human being that was so, so, so beautiful. And you don't realize how much you get your energy back. Like, we give so much energy to these old stories and wounds or recreating these unmet needs. And when we have unmet needs or painful stories we're running, we have emotional responses that create negative neurochemistry. Things like, too much cortisol, too much norepinephrine throughout the day. We get distressed, we feel that. And when we start to shift those patterns, we shift how we feel as a result, and our neurochemistry shifts as a result as well, along with the way we interact with people on so many different levels. So I hope this wasn't too long of a video. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please share this video. This video is so important, and it's like, one of the magical sort of keys to unlock healing in so many different ways is this piece of awareness. So please share this. Please spread all of this to other people you care about, who you want to understand this information. And thank you all so, so much for being here. And I will see you in the next video.